Hey, everybody, and welcome. This is our first Q&A session. I'm Cynthia Alice. I'm here in the studio with my producer.
Hey, this is Dave Croft. What is happening, everybody?
So welcome to our, I don't know. Hey, everybody, and welcome. This is our first Q&A session. I'm Cynthia
Can you tell
Alice.
it's the first one? I've got it pointed. Sorry about that. That was producer error.
I thought about calling it a fireside chat, but it's like way too hot for that. So yeah, first Q&A. Welcome. I'm glad you're with me, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you via this video. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you first of all to our angel patrons who can see this live, and any of our non-angel patrons, you will see this after it goes live. But thank you guys so much for your continued support. We will be doing this Q&A every month, usually the last Monday of every month, but you know, schedule permitting. So the first Q&A, and I'm now realizing that maybe I need to be on camera. Maybe I don't know. Not for today, but my question I had for you, RCA, is of all the things you do, and you do a lot. How many meetings did you have today?
I don't remember. I had too many. I did at least 3 meetings. I probably did about 10 phone calls, everything from congregation members to the sheriff's department today. So it was a very interesting day.
And so amongst all of that, everything that you do, why a podcast? Why start something which, you know, arguably takes up so much time, so many resources, not just the hours that it takes, but you know, financially and your time and preparation. I know you meet with Fred many times throughout the week. So why a podcast?
I think I've lost my mind. I love to do a podcast because I want to help people grow spiritually. And I feel really strongly that this is the new medium to reach as many people as possible. So it excites me to share my journey and think that it might, you know, impact other people so that they can live better lives. And the fact is, even when I'm sharing my own, I'm still learning. I'm learning my own lessons from my own journey. And I certainly learn, you know, from Frederick Cota Lewis, my co-host, and from you, Dave, as well. So I do it because I'm compelled to. I can't help it. I love the soul. I love talking about the soul, and I love supporting people on their spiritual journeys.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the name of the show.
Yeah.
We call it the flagship show.
Yeah.
And what was the genesis of that, and then how did that turn into something which was much larger, which is the entire channel, the Experience of the Soul channel?
Well, I wanted to show as a minister, sometimes I feel a little boxed in by expectations and being in a church building. I may not be, given our congregation, because we have really cool, open, accepting people. But for me, I feel like I can speak even more freely in this regard. And I think people want a real message. So in other words, they want to hear the real stuff. And Sunday morning is just not always the appropriate venue for that. So I've always prided myself on being very as real and authentic as possible, even when that's difficult. And we tried several names for the show, and just nothing felt real enough. So Authentic Spiritual Journey was everything, you know, I talk about. There's so many things I'm thinking right now. The authentic piece is important because it means I'm not going to come to the studio or the camera with every story planned and every and every innuendo rehearsed. It means that today, as I re-experience my journey, you know, through the telling, there might be a new lesson, and I want to be free to share that. So the authentic piece is really important. And then the spiritual journey aspect is, you know, we're all on the journey. So the name came naturally once we started getting clear about what we want. We kept saying we want to show that's real, that's authentic, that people can relate to, and we're all about the soul. So, and that is the spiritual journey of the evolving soul that I always talk about. And I think it was a 2-part question. Like, how did I?
Well, yeah, the genesis of the show, the Authentic Spiritual Journey, and how that kind of blossomed into a much larger thing, which wasn't just, one 45-minute show once a week,
Yeah.
but all of these other aspects.
Well, I hired a professional, is one. And before the show even started, I should back up and say, I took my time really with the organizational pieces. I interviewed people who listened to podcasts. I interviewed people who had done a podcast. And then I finally started listening to some podcasts to see what other people were doing. And, I really felt there was something missing. In terms of the name of the channel, which is Experience of the Soul, that went through several derivations. And the reason we ended with that is we realized all the aspects of the journey, including, say, recovery from addiction, the basic day-to-day spiritual life, that all these are related to the soul. And so I want to, like, a home where people can come and find a lot of different shows, that are going to support their soul and are going to reflect their particular life experience. So it's a long title. Both of them are Experience of the Soul, but I believe people are bright enough to get that. So a couple of people said, "Well, the show name's long." Yes, it is. And I'm cool with that,
Right.
because it's what we're talking about. And so my hope, my vision, my dream, and I know it's going to happen because we've already had people approach us, and a couple you don't even know about. I don't think they've.
I feel a meeting after.
Yeah, yeah. There's a meeting there about people wanting to partner with us to create new shows. And I just got an offer today to do a show on another channel. And I said, well, I have my own channel. So I will be here. And if you'd like to sponsor me, that would be something you could do. But that I'm really creating something here. So the channel is important because it's going to open a lot of avenues for different types of soul experiences, anything from prosperity to recovery. And I think there's going to be a need for that, especially spoken from a really authentic place.
Speaking of recovery, recovery has been a theme which has resurfaced.
Yeah.
Especially as we're now recording into August and right. those type of shows. Even though we were just wrapping up our first month, and the Eddie Watkins episode went out this morning, and Eddie is great. But even with Eddie, there this recurring thing, this recurring theme of recovery. Why do you think recovery is so on the forefront of what needs to be addressed? Is it that the modern church has kind of dropped the ball, or is it because people that find themselves at a CCU or in a Unity church, are more transparent or more able to be more vulnerable? You kind of feel what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I think there's several points. I would feel, I don't know if I would say the modern church has dropped the ball. I think church in general, for one, it's hard to reach every single need. And I think, in church in general, we're all trying to look good. And I do think that's can be a potential, what I would call failing of the modern church, because spirituality should be, in my view, especially spiritual community, should be where people come together just as they are, in recovery, looking for recovery, needing recovery, not sure what they need, but needing help and support to deal with life on life's terms. So people need a spiritual context, in other words, for what's happening. So recovery, I think the reason it comes up so much is so much of our culture is in denial of what's really happening. And certainly my generation, I'm a Gen Xer. I'm an old Gen Xer, I guess I should say.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah. I'm an old Gen Xer. So I'm not a boomer. I'm not a Gen Y. But our culture in particular, grew up where many of us had parents of the Depression, of World War II, and all of that. And so there was a lot of dysfunction actually in the home, as in the family system as we know it. And I think it's always been there, but in our generation, there started to be speaking up about things like
Mhm.
that, and advances in psychology. So we realized, some of these behaviors are not normal, right? So I think recovery is beginning to wake up to the possibility that life can be full of love, full of joy, full of life, full of health in terms of conversations and communication, so that we don't have to be unhealthy in the way we walk through life. We don't have to be in relationships where people treat us badly and we just sit and accept that. Um, so I think the idea of recovery is really waking up to the true self, which, as we call it, is the soul.
Right.
Yeah.
And that the authentic
Yes.
aspect. I know when you first approached me,
Yeah.
and I don't mean to get too authentic spiritual journey because that's for a different show. When you first approached
Right.
me, you were, it started out as you're just going to be the engineer, but you had a very conscious vision for kind of pulling me into it, and which makes me feel super valuable.
Yes.
So
and
thank
you
you.
are. And you are.
But I felt like it was really like a desire for diversity
Yeah.
to really be shown. And as a white male, I'm not usually the diverse one, in the crowd.
Yes, you
But,
are my diversity in this show.
I feel I'm your token.
You're my token white guy.
But talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about that, and about maybe in the culture of CCU, or in the culture of you as
Yeah.
a minister, and how diversity manifests itself in different ways.
Yeah, it's a great question, because CCU is really a special place. I've never known a spiritual community quite like it in terms of the support, and not only acceptance of one another, but frankly, the celebration of who we are, and figuring out how to value, each and every person. And I do value, Dave, your input, and I feel everybody has a gift to give. And I want to always encourage communication and collaboration, because I know the more, Dave, that you're coming into yourself, then I'm going to learn from that. Right. And so, I mean, I have a message to give, but I'm not the only one. And what Frederick offers, I was telling Dave earlier, by the way, it feels weird talking to this audience without Frederick here, but I get so much from him as well. And I believe when there are different viewpoints on the table that everybody wins. I don't believe that, only one voice is particularly healthy, because it's easy to start believing all your own ideas and get those ideas concretized, so that you're not, say, open to receiving a new perspective. So diversity is important to me for a number of reasons. One, I believe we all grow when we're surrounded with different kinds of people. I also had great models for that in my folks. We were always taught you treat everybody with equal respect. And I learned the value of that at a very early age. My dad's friends were educated and uneducated. They were Black and they were white, and they were men and they were women. And some of them were alcoholics falling down drunk, and others were ministers and priests. And they always had, I don't want to say, they always had a place at the table. Yeah. So that's still important for me personally. Yeah.
Speaking of ministers, can you talk a little bit about your ministerial path and how you went from a music major, conducting graduate student,
right? Yeah.
And how you wound up a minister, and what were some of the challenges, not only as a woman, which manifests itself and has since, King James.
Yeah, right. Yeah, God bless King James.
And the Council of Nicaea. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
And
yeah.
I literally mean guys.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's no joke.
Right. But also as a gay woman. Can you talk about some of the challenges, multiple pronged question, about your path and some of the challenges, and how unity ultimately was your landing zone, your landing.
Yeah.
spot.
I mean, I think it's a good way to say it. I was a musician, and I come from a super musical family. And so I didn't have much choice. Was I going to be a musician? It was kind of like, here, play this and figure it out.
We need a drummer in the family, so
Yeah.
drums.
Yeah, exactly. And we pick you because
Right.
everybody else already had something. I was the youngest. And then I also had a sister too, who, and we still play together today, but she was studying violin and she said, I really need an accompanist. I said, well, I'm really not that good on piano. She goes, you will be. Here's some Schubert,
Oh my gosh.
And so I never felt I gave her what she needed in an accompanist, but because she had faith in me, I would just, figure it out, which helped me in my conducting. So when I was 15, I started conducting my very first church job. I was 15 years old and I was conducting the adult choir. And I was also teaching Sunday school, which was really cool, an adult Sunday school class. And the woman who asked me to do it, at the time, my sister was the pianist and my brother was the organist, and I was the choir director. So that was a wonderful step for me because it was a way for me to have some success in my life. And it was a way for me to have some leadership. And something about being the youngest, and this is just my interpretation of it, I was always really concerned about other people's needs, and I still am. But it was really important for me to have something of my own I could develop. I wasn't just supporting my sister playing piano or just supporting my mom with with my grandmother who had Alzheimer's and lived with us. I had something to create. And, I started composing then. I composed a piece for organ. I started, writing choir charts for my choir to sing, like just intro pieces. So, and then I had a great friend who was a violinist in the Atlanta Symphony and would take me backstage. And, so I had a really great, like 15, 16, 17 years old, in terms of my musical career, it started taking off. And so, I had been a psychology major. That was my intended major. And then I switched to music once I visited the school and I saw the conducting teacher. So the path to conducting was huge. Because I felt music was, it was kind of a lifeline. I know that sounds dramatic, but it felt dramatic at the time that music was my lifeline. And so as much as I love music, and I'm still in contact, by the way, with one of my teachers, my percussion teacher. Hey, Dan, yo, what's up? And he might watch this. And he was incredible. What I started finding as a musician, because I was teaching, I was playing, I had started my master's, I was conducting a youth orchestra, I was an assistant of a community orchestra, assistant conductor for community orchestra, and I had conducted the opera in college, and I had conducted every group you could.
That's no small thing. Conducting these large ensembles, it
was huge.
That's no small thing.
Well, it was really huge in college because it was basically, in my undergrad, it was basically like I had a double major in percussion performance and in conducting, but there isn't such a thing. So it was just kind of like, here, just take a whole bunch of classes.
You were a conducting major? Or you were a percussion major?
I was a percussion major. They didn't really have a major in conducting. So had they, I would have accomplished that.
Right.
Because I conducted, the flute choir, the percussion ensemble, I taught rhythm to the piano pedagogy students.
Yep.
I did the brass ensemble, the wind ensemble, a symphonic wind ensemble in the orchestra. And then I also played in so many of those groups, and had incredible, support there. And the opera was really huge as well. And then after school, I started supporting a lot of composers, and I would create concerts and I would conduct orchestras and put those on. And one of my friends who I supported then now teaches film scoring at Princeton.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's
wow.
Awesome.
You should
I should hook you guys up.
Yeah, right.
Well, what's funny is this is something I learned about myself a long time ago. I really have an uncanny ability to see mastery. And even my teachers did not see this guy's mastery.
Wow.
And I helped him orchestrate and stuff, his whole first piece he wrote. And then I conducted it. And I always thought he had it. And one of my teachers said, well, it sounds like Schoenberg. It sounds like somebody. I said, well, every master first copies the other masters.
Yeah, that's how it works. That's how culture propagates.
I mean, Bonnie Raitt is still doing,
right.
Give
him something to talk about. Like
Muddy Waters licks. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Bonnie Raitt is still repeating the masters, and we see her as a master in the music world. So anyway, this is all about my music career, not exactly what you asked, but
it's still interesting. This is a Q&A. It can go anywhere it wants to go.
but from there, as I was working and playing, and then, got out of school and was really creating a career for myself, I just felt like something was missing.
Mm.
And I had remembered back when I was about 8 years old, I had felt really called to ministry and, had completely forgotten it. And so it was at that time I started looking into ministry in the Methodist Church, and that did not go well. And
well, can I ask? Can I pick a little bit? Was
Sure.
that because you were a woman, or because you were gay, or was that both?
Yes, and mostly gay was the problem. And
which is interesting because the Methodist Church was one of the first.
Yes.
Many years later.
Yes. Right. And, my experience in the Methodist Church was very good.
Mm-hmm.
And my godfather was, in fact, our Methodist minister and used to read theology books to me when I was in a bassinet kind of thing.
Wow.
My mom would drop me off while she went to the store, and he would read. And he taught American history at Oxford in England. I mean, he was just a very learned man. And so, of course, there was huge disappointment in that because I had spent my whole childhood going through the Methodist Church as well as, ministering as a choir director. So I felt like I was kind of treated like a second-class citizen. And I thought, oh man, I don't know exactly what it feels like to be Black, but I know how it is to be judged by some aspect of who you are and kept,
just
marginalized. Yeah. And when that did not work out in the Methodist Church, I really had to do a soul searching, because I said, when I was a kid, I felt called to minister. Was I wrong? And so after that meeting with the Methodist Church, I was driving home and I stopped by this church. It was actually a Lutheran church. I said, can I just come in here and pray? And they said, sure, we'll let you in. And I said, I won't be long. And I was just saying, okay, God, what do you want?
That's like something from a movie, walking around, going into random church, and falling on your knees, and there's a pastor there,
Except there was no pastor. There was just an empty room. But yeah, it was like the secretary, because, the pastor was off doing what pastors do, which who knows, maybe going to have a donut or something.
Right. Or maybe helping the sick or visiting someone in the hospital.
Yeah. But she was like, yeah, go ahead and go in. And I was like, okay, God, what is it? And I sat in that space, and, finally, I was listening. I was like, okay, I don't hear anything. But then I got this overwhelming sense of it's okay. You're going to be okay. And it's really strange because it was later in the day, and I've had this twice. Once was a cathedral in Ireland, and it was this place here. And I felt the sun shift, come through the window and shine right on me sitting there. And I said, you know what? I'm going to just keep moving forward. So it's not the Methodist Church. So I said, okay, it's not the Methodist Church. I don't know what this means. But then right about that time, I had moved into a new place, and I was sharing a house with this woman, and she had the top and I had the bottom half of the house. And it just so happens she was the president of the board at Unity.
Like Unity,
like not Unity Village, but the Unity Church where she was.
Gotcha.
And she knew I was a drummer and everything. And at the time I was working at a Methodist church. I had just been hired to they said, we want you to do music and bring people in and all that. And so I said, okay, I'll do it interim, because I was already feeling this discontent. So I didn't want to commit. I said, I'll help you, till you can get somebody an interim.
Right. You knew the clock was ticking on how
long
you were
I was
like,
okay, because I kept starting this stuff and I was kind of on the edge of what the church was willing to do. I do a praise service, or I'd want to go help, people in need, or I was really working with this guy who ran a Native American ministry, a Native man named Frank. So anyway, I was doing all this stuff and helping the homeless and doing a lot of work like that. And I just was like, I don't know what's next, but this is not it. So I move into this place, and the woman who shared the house, who owned the house, I lived there a week, all my stuff was not even in. And she said, well, you're never going to believe what happened at the board meeting. I said, what? I have no idea. And she said, well, we just voted to hire a drummer, and if you want it, the job is yours. So I said, yeah. I said, well, yeah, I'm in. I turned in my notice that Sunday. That was it. And it was incredible because I had about 2 months before, a friend of mine had like paid me to come do music there because she kept saying, "You got to know about my church. You got to know about my church." And
at that Unity,
yeah, that
church?
particular Unity. And I was like, "Well, whatever." She goes, "You're just a Unity person. You pray, you meditate, and your spirit and everything." And I said, "Well, I have a church job. I can't come." She said, "I'll pay you." I said, "No problem. I'll take the day off then." And so she had paid me to come do a piece there at the church. And so then when the board president, came home and told me that, I was like, okay, so there's something for me here.
Yes, confirmation. Yeah.
Yeah. And then in about a year and a half, in about 9 months, I moved to Kansas City. And then in another year, I was in school for ministerial school. And I was still playing then. I even taught music some in Kansas City, and was even going to work at a Catholic school. But then the whole gay thing came up again. And, and the principal, who was clearly gay, also said to me, you can be gay, you can't talk about it, that kind of thing. I said, okay, I got it. I'm really done with this type of thing. And so that's when my Unity career started. And after being in Kansas City a month, I walked into the largest Unity there, and somebody shoved an application in my hand and said, "I think you should work here." And that's how my Unity career continued. So I worked for about a year at the first church. And then after moving to Kansas City, I got a job at one of the top churches in the whole movement.
And what years are we looking at then?
Well, it's probably 98 is when 1998, I found Unity at Seattle Unity. And I'm still in touch with the minister there. I just saw her at conference.
Oh, wow.
And then, so it was about 99, 2000 that I moved to Unity Village. And then I started school in 2001 and was ordained 2003.
Yeah, and you've been at CCU 10 years now, yeah?
Yep.
We just celebrated 10 years.
Yes.
That's amazing. We have about 3 or 4 minutes left. Telling anybody in the chat room, if you have any questions, please go ahead and enter them now. I want to circle back to something that again, this is a selfish little question. One of the things that really
somebody else wants to know this.
No. I have found, and I think you answered it. I have found that as a musician, I can tell how much stock, how much effort, how much importance you give in music, because you honor your musicians.
Right.
Is that a direct result of you being a musician, or is it that plus a deep-seated belief in how music affects churchgoers or the congregation? Where does that come from? Because that's somewhat unusual. I mean, it's not unusual to see, somebody on staff who's the music director and everything, but to know all of the resources that you put into the music team specifically, is that a result of your history as a musician? Or talk a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, I think so, and just growing up around so much music, I mean, music is so important to me personally. And I think being a musician and having been a church musician, I know what the musicians go through, and I know how it is to make a living as a musician. So I think that's part of it. And I think a very large part is, as you're saying, that music touches the heart and soul of listeners, sometimes in a way a spoken message cannot. And there are probably many people, and I wouldn't blame them for this, that come to our church for the music, and probably some that come more for the message. But what I know is, without one or the other, it's a really different experience, because music does, open the heart to prepare to receive. And sometimes people will go out singing a song and they might not remember any of a message, so I think it is, all of those things. And music matters to me because music is culture. Music is culture. And basically food, language, and music is how you define a culture. So I want to always have a culture of celebration, a culture of aliveness. And I think music is a really important part of that.
Well, just know that it does not go unnoticed.
Oh, thank you.
I feel extremely blessed. And I don't say that selfishly, because Shannon, my wife, is the music director.
Yeah.
But no, I think, having been a church musician all my life,
right.
I've seen, we're not going to pay anybody, to we're going to hire a live orchestra, right?
Right.
And pay them.
Right.
The last question I want to talk about is actually about this past Sunday. Now that since we're talking about music,
Sure.
At CCU we had a music only service.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about the where that kind of came from and how you think it went?
Well, I'll tell you, there's something some might consider odd about the way I run my ministry. The bottom line is, if I get what I call a guidance from spirit, in other words, if I get an intuitive feeling, idea, or knowing, I just go with it. It scares people sometimes because they go, well, how do you know we're supposed to do that? I say, God told me. The same way I knew to ask Frederick Cotto Lewis to be my co-host. I asked Spirit who it was. Fred came into my mind and I called Fred. I didn't think about pros and cons.
You didn't fleece it,
Yeah, I mean, I didn't ask 12 people what they thought and all
Run
that.
It by a committee.
Yeah, right. And there's a lot of great jokes in church too about, what do you call a horse designed by a committee?
What's that?
A camel.
Right.
So the idea, well, there was a couple ideas. One was we'd been really focused on a lot of prosperity stuff. And some people for the very first time were doing hard work in that level of their lives. So some were tithing, some were journaling, some were doing both. Some were doing, deep soul work. And it felt like we just needed a week where we could just celebrate life and being together, and all the kids were going to be in there too. And I think kids should know church can be fun. Some of the generations coming up have never, ever been inside any church. And so I want when kids are there to have something especially for them and something that engages them. And so how that came about, that's a long way of saying, when I was praying about the fifth Sunday, and by the way, that's my United Methodist background coming out. We always did potlucks, fifth Sunday. So
all the programs all fit nicely in 3 points in a message. Yeah.
Fifth Sundays are really cool. And we do that on the podcast. We do a guest on the fifth.
I'm so on board with that.
Yeah, the fifth
that makes my little concrete sequential brain happy.
Yes. We love the predictable in that way. So when I was praying about it, I was like, I want to do something. And it was like all music. And it was like, oh yeah, all faith, all love, all music. And then it was all love, all faith, all music, all love, all faith. I never remember how it ended up. And even at staff meetings, somebody said, which one is it? I said, I don't care. As long as all those three are there, so people know what they're going to come into. And the impact was tremendous. It was, I've had more emails, calls, Facebook posts, personal thank yous from that service than probably any in the past couple of years. I mean, it was very, very powerful. And I have to say, if I did not have such a capable music director and band, and incredible singers who are from our congregation and volunteer, all but one, without both the talent and consciousness of all those individuals, I don't think I would ever even considered it.
Yeah. And I think it's a manifestation of the energy that you sow into that. So, and my prayer is, we'll do it more. I'm just now praying about, okay, when do we do it again? And maybe the next fifth Sunday, we'll see. Yeah, there you go. Awesome. Well, I want to thank you guys very much for hanging out with us for this, the first of what are to be many live Q&As.
Yes.
And thank you once again for all of your support of the podcast. It does not go unnoticed and continues to help us out. I've got so many great things planned for you. So thanks for hanging out with us.
Thank you. Many blessings to you.
We'll see you next month.